My stepmother shoved me against the wall and screamed that I had shattered my late mother's last ornament. Dad believed her, just as always, and threw me out into the winter cold. He had no idea a camera the size of a thumb was silently recording. Months later, when they begged me to return as their financial savior, he finally found the footage and saw the true face of the woman he had slept beside for 15 years. My name is Katie Burke, and I should have known better than to believe that this year would be different. I was in my late 20s, a data analyst living a quiet, self-sufficient life in Phoenix, Arizona. But the moment the wheels of my rental car crunched over the snow-packed driveway of my childhood home in Willow Ridge, Ohio, I felt like a helpless teenager again. The house looked like a postcard from a manufactured memory. The gutters were lined with perfect icicle lights. The wreath on the door was professionally arranged, and the windows glowed with a warmth that I knew, from years of experience, did not extend to me. Dad had begged me to come. He had used that specific tone of voice, the one that sounded weary and hopeful, telling me that it was time for the whole family to be together. He said Vanessa really wanted to make amends, that Brielle was dying to see me, that it was Christmas and we needed to put the past behind us. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that the 15 years of subtle exclusions were just a misunderstanding, a series of oversights that we could finally correct over eggnog and roast beef. Entering the hallway was the first strike against that hope. The walls were a shrine to the Burke family success story, or at least, Vanessa's version of it. There were dozens of framed photographs arranged in intricate collages. There was Brielle in her pink tutu at age 6, Brielle winning a local beauty pageant at 10, Brielle and Vanessa laughing on a beach in Cabo, Dad and Vanessa clinking champagne glasses on their 10th anniversary. Then there were the grandchildren, Brielle's kids, looking angelic in matching sweaters. I scanned the wall for a full minute before I found myself. I was in the background of a barbecue photo from 5 years ago, half of my face obscured by Dad's shoulder, out of focus and looking away. That was it. In the visual history of this house, I was a ghost. I walked into the living room, where the scent of cinnamon pine cones was aggressive enough to make my eyes water. The tree was a masterpiece of coordination, decked out in gold and cream ribbons that probably cost more than my first car, but my eyes went immediately to the very top, just below the star. There, precarious and out of place among the modern decor, hung the single glass sphere with the delicate white snowflake suspended inside. It was my mother's, my real mother. It was the last thing of hers that had not been packed into boxes, donated to charity, or accidentally lost during one of Vanessa's cleaning sprees. Every year, I checked for it. Seeing it there gave me a small, fragile anchor. It was the only evidence that she had ever lived here, that I had ever belonged here before Vanessa walked in and redecorated our lives. Dinner was a performance. The table was set with the good china, and my stepmother sat at the foot of the table, radiating the kind of aggressive hospitality that dares you to complain. Aunt Sarah and Uncle Bob were there, along with Brielle and her chaotic brood of children. Vanessa spent the first half of the meal praising Brielle's artistic temperament, and the second half dismantling my character with a smile plastered on her face. Katie was always such a whirlwind, Vanessa said, pouring wine for Uncle Bob. Do you remember the time she knocked over that expensive vase in the foyer? Just clumsy. We had to child-proof the house until she was 18. She laughed, a tinkering, light sound. The relatives chuckled politely. I gripped my fork until my knuckles turned white. I had not broken that vase. Brielle had thrown a tennis ball for the dog, but the narrative had been rewritten years ago. I actually have steady hands, I said, trying to keep my voice light. I work with server hardware. You can't be clumsy in my line of work. Oh, computers. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. That is different, dear. That is machines. I am talking about grace, about being careful with precious things. I swallowed the lump of anger in my throat and focused on my potatoes. I was not going to ruin Christmas. I was going to be the bigger person. I was going to survive this night and fly back to my condo in Phoenix, where the only expectations I had to meet were my own. After dinner, the family splintered off. The men went to the basement to watch the game. Brielle took the kids upstairs to settle them down, and Aunt Sarah went to the kitchen to start the coffee. I stayed in the living room, staring at the fire, exhausted. "We need to talk, Katie." I stiffened. Vanessa walked in, closing the double doors behind her. The noise of the house faded, leaving us in a thick, tense silence. She did not sit down. She stood by the fireplace, adjusting a stocking that was already perfectly straight. "Your father is worried," she started. "It was always Dad who was worried, never her. He sees how distant you are, and frankly, with the economy the way it is, he is worried about the future." "I am doing fine, Vanessa," I said. "My job is stable." "I am not talking about you," she snapped, the mask slipping just an inch. "I am talking about us, about the family. Brielle is struggling. The studio is going through a rough patch, and those grandbabies need things. We have been carrying the weight for everyone. Your father is not young anymore. He cannot keep working 60 hours a week because Brielle needs help, and you are off in Arizona hoarding your paycheck." I stood up. I had heard this tune before, but the volume had been turned up. "Hoarding? I sent you $5,000 last year for the roof. I paid for Brielle's car repairs in July. I am not a bottomless pit. Vanessa, I have a mortgage. I have my own life." "A life you built on the foundation we gave you," she hissed, stepping closer. Her perfume was cloying, overwhelming. "We sacrificed everything for you girls. And now, when we need a lifeline, you act like a stranger? You are selfish, Katie, just like your mother was." The air left the room. "Do not talk about my mother." "Why not? She is the reason you are so cold. You think you are better than us with your little degree and your condo? You are nothing without this family." "I am done," I said, my voice shaking. "I am not giving you any more money, not a cent. Tell Brielle to get a job that actually pays. I am leaving." I turned to walk away, but she lunged. It happened so fast. She grabbed my arm, spinning me back around. "You do not walk away from me when I am speaking," she screamed. She shoved me. It was not a playful push. It was a hard, violent thrust meant to hurt. I stumbled back, my heel catching on the thick rug, and I slammed hard into the large glass display cabinet behind me. The impact shuddered through the heavy wood. The cabinet rocked. And then I heard it, a sickening, distinct sound. Clink, slide, smash. I froze. I did not need to look to know what it was. The vibration had knocked the ornament from its high branch. I looked down. On the hardwood floor, amidst the fake snow of the tree skirt, lay the shattered remains of the glass sphere. The delicate white snowflake inside was crushed into powder. "No," I whispered. I dropped to my knees, reaching out, though there was nothing to save. "Look what you did!" Vanessa shrieked. I looked up, tears blurring my vision, expecting to see shock on her face. Instead, I saw calculation. She stared at me with pure venom, and then, with a speed that was terrifying, she raised her own hand and clawed her fingernails down the side of her neck. A bright red welt appeared instantly on her pale skin. Before I could process what was happening, she slapped me. Hard. It was a stinging, open palm strike across my cheekbone that knocked the wind out of me. "Help! Mark! Mark! Help me!" Vanessa screamed, throwing herself back against the sofa, clutching her neck, sobbing instantly. The kitchen door flew open. Dad came running in, his face flushed from beer and holiday cheer, a smile dying on his lips as he took in the scene. He saw Vanessa, weeping hysterically, clutching a red mark on her neck. He saw the shattered glass on the floor, the remains of his late wife's ornament. And he saw me, kneeling amidst the wreckage, my face stinging, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "She hit me." "Mark," Vanessa wailed, pointing a trembling finger at me. I tried to calm her down. I tried to talk to her about her attitude, and she just snapped. She attacked me. She shoved me and she broke it. She broke your wife's ornament. Brielle and the kids were peeking over the banister now. Aunt Sarah was in the doorway, hand over her mouth. "Katie," Dad said. His voice was low, dangerous. "Dad, no," I scrambled up. "Dad, she shoved me. She did this to herself. She is lying." "Look at my neck," Vanessa sobbed, tilting her head to show the angry red scratch. "She is crazy. Mark, she has always been jealous of me. But this? In front of the children?" Dad walked over to me. I looked into his eyes, searching for the man who used to read me bedtime stories, the man who had grieved with me when Mom died. I looked for my father. But I only saw Vanessa's husband. "You are a grown woman," he spat, his face twisted in disgust. "And you cannot control yourself? You attack my wife in my home?" "I didn't touch her," I pleaded, tears finally spilling over. "Dad, please, look at the glass. I fell into the cabinet because she pushed me." "Stop lying," he shouted, making me flinch. "Just stop it. You have no respect for this family, and no respect for the memory of your mother. Look at what you did to her ornament. That was the last thing I had." "I didn't." "Get out," he said. He didn't yell it. He said it with a cold finality that was worse than any scream. "Get your things and get out of my house. I will not have violence under this roof." "Mark, it is Christmas Eve," Aunt Sarah whispered from the doorway, but Vanessa wailed louder, and Dad shook his head. "I don't care," Dad said, not looking away from me. "She is not welcome here tonight." I looked at him. I looked at Vanessa, who was burying her face in a handkerchief, hiding the dry eyes of a predator who had just won the hunt. I looked at the shattered glass on the floor, the last piece of my mother gone forever. Something inside me broke, too. But unlike the ornament, it didn't shatter into useless dust. It hardened, the desperate need for his approval. The child inside me begging to be believed, simply evaporated. I wiped my face. I stood up straight. I grabbed my coat from the back of the armchair. "Good," I said, my voice cutting through the sound of Vanessa's theatrical sobbing. "At least now I know exactly where I stand." I turned my back on them, walked out into the biting winter air, and let the heavy front door slam shut on the only life I had ever known. The silence inside my rental car was heavy, a suffocating blanket that felt terrifyingly familiar. It was the same silence that used to fill the hallways of our house after my mother died. I sat there with the engine idling, the heater blasting against the freezing Ohio night, and let my mind drift back to the beginning of the erasure. It did not happen all at once. You do not wake up one day and realize you have become a second-class citizen in your own home. It happens by degrees, a slow erosion of status until you are just part of the furniture, useful but invisible. I was 13 years old when my mother passed away. The cancer took her quickly, leaving my father and me standing in a house that felt too large and too quiet. For that first year, Dad was a shell. He moved through the rooms like he was afraid to touch anything, as if disturbing a throw pillow or moving a coffee cup would break the fragile spell of her memory. During that dark year, the Christmas ornament was his holy grail. He would hold that glass sphere with the snowflake inside for hours, staring at it as if he could see her reflection in the curve of the glass. It was the only time I saw him cry. We were partners in grief then, two survivors on a raft, clinging to each other because the rest of the world had washed away. Then came Vanessa. She appeared exactly 1 year after the funeral, and the timing felt so precise it was almost clinical. She was a widow herself, vibrant and charming, with a laugh that seemed to chase the shadows out of the corners of our living room. She came with a tragic backstory and a daughter, Brielle, who was 3 years younger than me and had eyes like a frightened deer. The relatives breathed a collective sigh of relief. They whispered at family gatherings that it was a miracle, that Mark finally had someone to take care of him, that the house would have life in it again. In the beginning, I fell for it too. Vanessa was masterfully maternal. She called me her daughter within 2 weeks of meeting me. She baked cookies from scratch, took me shopping for clothes that actually fit, and asked me questions about my day. It felt like the sun had come back out. I wanted a mother so badly that I ignored the way her eyes would glaze over when I talked for too long, or how she would subtly steer every conversation back to Brielle. I was just grateful not to be drowning in Dad's depression anymore. But once the moving trucks arrived and Vanessa's name was added to the mailbox, the dynamic shifted. It was subtle at first, masked as logical practicality. "We need to reorganize," Vanessa said one morning over breakfast, her voice dripping with reason. "Brielle is struggling with the transition. Mark, she needs a sanctuary." The reorganization meant that Brielle, who had been sharing a guest room, was moved into the master suite down the hall, the one with the bay window and the ensuite bathroom. It was repainted a soft lavender, filled with new white furniture, and decorated with ballet slippers and ribbons. My room, meanwhile, stayed exactly as it was, except for one significant change. Vanessa started storing boxes in my closet. "Just until we sort through everything," she had said. Those boxes were filled with my mother's things, her old coats, her books, her collection of porcelain figurines. Slowly, my room became less of a bedroom and more of a storage unit for the life Vanessa was erasing from the rest of the house. When I complained that I had no room for my desk anymore, Vanessa smiled that tight, patronizing smile that I would come to loathe. "Oh, Katie, do not be difficult," she said. "Brielle needs the space to practice her dance. She has so much potential, but she is fragile. She needs the right environment to bloom. You are smart. You can do your homework on the kitchen table. You could learn in a cardboard box if you had to." It sounded like a compliment. It was not. It was the first time she articulated the philosophy that would define the next decade of my life. Brielle needed resources to succeed. I was expected to succeed in spite of the lack of them. Then came the school conversation. Brielle was enrolled in Willow Ridge Academy, a private institution with a tuition that could have bought a new car every year. I remained at the local public high school. When I asked Dad why I couldn't go to the academy, where they had a computer lab I had been dreaming of, Vanessa answered for him. "We have to prioritize," she said, placing a hand on Dad's arm, effectively silencing him. "The academy has a renowned arts program. It is the only place Brielle can really develop her talents. You are already doing so well in public school. Katie, why fix what isn't broken? Besides, we have to be careful with money now that we are a larger family." Dad nodded, looking at his coffee cup. "She is right, honey. You are doing great where you are. We are so proud of how independent you are." That was the trap. The word independent. The word strong. Every time I was denied something, a tutor, a school trip, a new pair of shoes, it was framed as a testament to my resilience. Katie doesn't need that. She is low maintenance. Katie can figure it out. She is resourceful. My birthdays became the measuring stick of my worth. For Brielle's 16th, they rented out the country club. There was a DJ, a 3-tier cake with fondant flowers, and a dress that cost $400. Dad gave a speech about his beautiful, talented stepdaughter. For my 16th, 3 months later, I came home from school to find a store-bought sheet cake on the counter. It was vanilla. I hate vanilla. Vanessa apologized as she rushed past me, car keys in hand. "Happy birthday, sweetie. I am so sorry. But Brielle has a crisis with her costume for the recital, and we have to drive to Columbus to get it fixed. There is $20 on the fridge. Order yourself a pizza. We will celebrate properly on the weekend. I promise." They did not celebrate on the weekend. The weekend came and went, consumed by the drama of the recital. When I tried to bring it up to Dad later, sitting in the garage while he worked on his woodworking, he sighed, looking exhausted. "Don't be jealous, Katie," he said, wiping sawdust from his hands. "I know it is hard, but Vanessa is under a lot of pressure. Brielle isn't like you. She needs a lot of support. You are tough. You are the rock of this family. I need you to be the grown-up here." I was 16. I did not want to be a rock. I wanted a dad. But the praise worked like a drug. I wanted his approval so desperately that I accepted the burden. I became the easy child. I stopped asking for money. I stopped asking for rides. I learned to fix the leaking faucet in my bathroom. because asking Dad to do it meant taking time away from Vanessa's honey-do list. I learned to cook my own meals because family dinner was often dictated by Brielle's dietary whims or rehearsal schedule. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the periphery of their happiness. I was the built-in babysitter when they wanted a date night. I was the dog walker. I was the one who stayed home to wait for the plumber while they went to the lake house. And through all of it, the ornament was my singular act of defiance. Every Christmas, the decoration of the tree was a Vanessa production. She would buy new themes every year: rustic chic, silver and blue, modern minimalism, my mother's old decorations. The handmade macaroni stars and the mismatched baubles we had collected over the years were banished to the attic, labeled as clutter. But I fought for the glass sphere. It was the only battle I refused to lose. "It does not match the aesthetic, Katie," Vanessa would sigh, holding a box of designer gold ribbons. "It stands out like a sore thumb." "It goes on the tree," I would say, my voice trembling but firm. "Top branch, just like Mom did." Dad would look uncomfortable, caught between his new wife's perfect vision and his daughter's grief. "Just let her hang it, Ness," he would mumble. "It is small." So I would climb the ladder, my hands shaking, and place the delicate glass sphere near the top. For a few weeks every year, that snowflake was my flag. It was my way of saying, "I am still here. She was here. You cannot paint over everything." I would stare at it late at night, when the house was finally quiet, and the perfect lights of Vanessa's perfect tree twinkled in the darkness. I would imagine my mother watching me, seeing the independent, strong woman I was being forced to become. I hoped she was proud, but mostly, I just felt a crushing loneliness. I realized that the strength everyone praised me for was just a scar tissue forming over the places where I should have been loved. I was the backup plan, the insurance policy, the child who would take care of herself so they could pour everything into the child who demanded it. I thought I had made peace with that role. I thought I understood the terms of the contract. I demand nothing, and in return, I get to keep my small corner of existence. But tonight, standing in the cold, I realized the contract had been fraudulent all along. They didn't just want me to be low maintenance. They wanted me to be non-existent. And the moment I became inconvenient, the moment I stopped being a resource and started being a person with boundaries, I was discarded. The ornament was gone. The glass was shattered. And looking back at the dark windows of the house where I grew up, I finally accepted the truth that had been staring me in the face since I was 13 years old. They did not love me for who I was. They tolerated me for what I did not ask of them. I put the car in gear. My hands were freezing on the steering wheel, but my eyes were dry. I had spent 15 years trying to earn a place in a family that had already filled my seat. I was done auditing a class I was never going to pass. I drove away from Willow Ridge without looking back, leaving the shattered glass and the perfect lies behind me on the living room floor. The timeline of my erasure accelerated the moment we hit high school. If my childhood was a slow fade, my teenage years were a sudden sharp edit out of the family script. It started with a set of keys. I remember the afternoon Brielle turned 16. It was a humid Tuesday in July, and the driveway was blocked by a surprise that could not have been missed from space. A cream-colored convertible Beetle, used but immaculate, sat glistening in the sun with a red ribbon the size of a beach ball on the hood. The whole family was there. Aunt Sarah, Uncle Bob, neighbors, clapping as Brielle shrieked and jumped into Dad's arms. Vanessa was directing the photo shoot, naturally. "Chin up. Brielle, Mark, hand on her shoulder. Look at that smile." I stood on the porch, holding a tray of lemonade I had been asked to prepare, watching them. I felt a pang of envy, sharp and hot, but I swallowed it. I told myself that they had been saving for this. I told myself that when my turn came 3 years later, it might not be a convertible, but it would be something. When I turned 16, the driveway was empty. There was no party. There was no crowd. There was a small vanilla sheet cake from the grocery store on the kitchen counter, the kind with the generic balloon frosting. Dad came home late from work, looking haggard, and Vanessa was busy looking at fabric swatches for the living room drapes. Happy birthday, kiddo, Dad said, loosening his tie. He looked around the kitchen, then at me, and I saw the guilt flicker in his eyes before he extinguished it with a practiced sigh. Listen, Katie, I know we did the big car thing for Brielle, but, well, business has been a little tight this quarter, and you know how expensive Brielle's dance competitions are getting. It is okay, I said, the words tasting like ash. I understand. I knew you would, Vanessa chimed in, not looking up from her swatches. You are so practical. Katie, besides, a car is a huge responsibility. We figured you would appreciate the freedom of earning your own way. There is an opening at the ice cream parlor downtown. If you save up, you can buy something that suits you. It means more when you work for it, right? That was the mantra. It means more when you work for it. It was a beautiful lesson, one that apparently only applied to me. While Brielle spent her summers at leadership camps in the mountains, which mostly seemed to involve horseback riding and posting selfies, I was assigned the role of the household revenue generator, or rather, the cost saver. I spent my summers dog-sitting for the neighbors, mowing lawns, and working shifts at the local library. It is good for your character, Vanessa told me as she packed Brielle's designer luggage for another trip. We are prioritizing Brielle right now because she needs that extra push to find her path. You are already on a path. You are the steady one. Being the steady one meant I was invisible until something needed fixing. I was the one who knew how to reset the router, how to descale the coffee machine, and how to file the family's receipts for tax season. I was an unpaid intern in the business of the Burke family. Then came the college admission cycle. That was when the financial disparity shifted from unfair to life-altering. Brielle had her heart set on a private arts college in Florida. It was prestigious, exclusive, and cost more per semester than most people earned in a year. When the acceptance letter came, Vanessa wept with joy. They spent weeks planning the move. They leased a luxury apartment off campus because the dorms were too distracting for Brielle's creative process. They bought sleek, modern furniture. They set up a monthly allowance for her that included groceries, gas, and networking expenses. I had the grades to go anywhere. I had acceptance letters from state universities and a few out-of-state engineering programs that I had been dreaming about for years. I laid them out on the dining room table one evening, waiting for Dad to come home. When he saw them, he smiled, but it was a tight, painful smile. He sat down opposite me, rubbing his temples. These are great schools, Katie, really impressive. I got into the engineering program at Ohio State, I said, pointing to the letter, and I got a partial scholarship. Partial, Dad repeated. He looked at Vanessa, who was standing by the sink, aggressively scrubbing a pan. Mark, be realistic with her, Vanessa said sharply. Dad took a breath. Honey, with Brielle starting in Florida, the tuition, the apartment, we are stretched thin. We just cannot take on another massive tuition bill right now. But I have the scholarship, I argued, my voice rising. I can work. I just need help with the rest. It is still thousands of dollars we do not have, Vanessa said, turning around. Why put that burden on your father? The community college here in town has a perfectly adequate transfer program. You can live at home, save money on rent and food, and transfer later. It is the smart choice. I looked at Dad, begging him to intervene, begging him to say that I deserved the same shot Brielle was getting. You are so smart, Katie, he said softly, reaching across the table to pat my hand. You are good at math, good with computers. You could learn in a barn and still come out on top. I believe in you. I trust you to make this work without the fancy price tag. Brielle, she needs the environment. She needs the structure. You don't. I trust you. That was the weapon. He used his faith in my competence to justify his neglect. He flattered me into a corner where asking for help made me look weak. So I stayed. I enrolled in the community college. I lived in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the boxes of my mother's things that Vanessa still hadn't let me unpack. My life became a grueling loop of lectures, shifts, and exhaustion. I worked days at the college computer lab, troubleshooting printer jams for students who were half as smart as me, but had parents who paid their way. At night, I worked the closing shift at a burger joint near the highway. I came home smelling of fryer grease and onions, tiptoeing past Dad's bedroom so I wouldn't wake them. I remember one night vividly. It was a Tuesday in November, raining hard. I was sitting at the small desk in my room, trying to study for a multivariate calculus exam. The light from my desk lamp was flickering, and I was eating instant noodles out of a styrofoam cup because Vanessa had made a family dinner but hadn't saved me a plate. My phone buzzed. It was a notification. Brielle is live. Curiosity, or maybe masochism, made me click it. The screen filled with Brielle's face, perfectly lit by a ring light. She was in her Florida apartment. In the background, I could see granite countertops, a stainless steel fridge, and a group of beautiful, laughing friends opening bottles of wine. "Guys, seriously," Brielle was saying to the camera, waving a glass of Pinot Grigio, "you have to live your truth. Like my dad always says, you only get one life, so do not settle for anything less than fabulous. We are going to the club in an hour, but first, look at this view." She walked to the balcony. The camera panned over palm trees and city lights. "Life is for living," she shouted into the night. I looked at my styrofoam cup. I looked at the rain streaking my window. I looked at the textbook that cost me $300, which I had to pay for by picking up 2 extra shifts. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I felt something click into place. A cold, heavy gear in the machinery of my heart. They weren't just neglecting me. They were consuming my potential to fuel hers. Every dollar I didn't get was a dollar that went into that apartment, that wine, that truth. I turned off the phone. I threw the rest of the noodles in the trash. I opened the calculus book. "Fine," I whispered to the empty room. "If I am on my own, then I will be the best investment I ever make." I aced the exam. I aced the semester. I worked 60 hours a week in the summer. I saved every single dime that didn't go to tuition. 2 years later, I finished my associate degree with a perfect GPA. The graduation ceremony was on a Friday morning. I had reminded Dad about it for weeks. I had put it on the calendar in the kitchen. The morning of the ceremony, I walked into the kitchen in my cap and gown. The house was silent. There was a note on the counter. "Katie, Brielle had a crisis with her final showcase. The zipper on her main costume broke, and she is having a meltdown. We had to catch the first flight to Fort Lauderdale to help her sort it out. We are so sorry to miss your big moment, but we know you understand. Family first? Send us a picture. Dad is so proud." I stood there, reading the note over and over. Family first. I drove myself to the ceremony. I sat in a sea of students whose parents were waving bouquets and blowing air horns. When they called my name, Catherine Burke, I walked across the stage, took the diploma cover, and shook the dean's hand. There was no one in the audience cheering for me. After the ceremony, I stood by the brick sign of the college. I stopped a stranger, a nice older woman who looked like a grandmother. "Excuse me," I said, holding out my phone. "Could you take a picture of me?" "Of course, honey," she said. "Where are your folks?" "They couldn't make it," I said. My voice didn't crack. "They are out of town." She took the photo. In it, I am smiling, but my eyes are hard. I look like someone who has realized that the cavalry is not coming. That afternoon, I went to the bank. I opened a new account solely in my name at a different bank across town. I deposited the checks for my graduation gifts, mostly small amounts from aunts and uncles, and transferred my entire savings from the joint account I had shared with Dad. I had been accepted to a university in Phoenix for my bachelor's degree. It was far. It was hot. It was a place where nobody knew the name Burke. I hadn't told Dad yet. I went home and packed. I didn't take much, just my clothes, my laptop, and the few books that mattered. I left the furniture. I left the old toys. I left the boxes of Mom's things in the closet because I realized that carrying them was just carrying a ghost. I needed to travel light. I booked a ticket on a Greyhound bus because I couldn't afford a plane ticket, and I refused to ask Dad for one. When I told him I was leaving the next day, He looked shocked. "Phoenix?" he asked, blinking. That is across the country. Katie, why so far?" "Because that is where the best scholarship is." I lied. It wasn't about the scholarship, it was about the distance. "But who will watch the house when we visit Brielle?" Vanessa asked, panic edging into her voice. "Who will help with the tax prep?" "You will figure it out," I said. "You are resourceful." I walked to the bus station the next morning. I dragged 2 heavy suitcases over the cracked pavement, sweating in the Ohio humidity. When I climbed onto that bus and smelled the mix of diesel and stale air, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I sat by the window as the bus pulled out of Willow Ridge. I watched the town scroll by, the high school where I was invisible, the ice cream shop where I served sundaes to my classmates, the house where I was a guest in my own life. I made a vow then, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. If they are always going to put me last, then I have to be the one to put me first. No one else is going to do it. From this moment on, I am my own family. The bus turned onto the highway, heading west, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone. I was just going. The heat in Phoenix was different from the humidity in Ohio. It was dry, aggressive, and clarifying. It felt like it burned away the fog that had surrounded my brain for the last decade. I had graduated with a degree in data science and systems security, a piece of paper that I had paid for with sweat, sleepless nights, and thousands of burger patties flipped under fluorescent lights. But the real victory came in the form of an email from Northbridge Analytics. It was a healthcare data analysis firm, unglamorous, and buried in a corporate park that looked like a motherboard from the sky. They offered me a position as a junior security analyst. The starting salary was $65,000 a year. To Brielle, that amount might have been a few months of rent and networking dinners. To me, it was a staggering, life-altering fortune. I remember sitting in the HR orientation meeting on my first day. The representative, a kind woman named Sarah, was explaining the benefits package. She talked about health insurance, dental, and something called a 401k match. "The company matches 50% of your contributions up to 6% of your salary," she said. I raised my hand. "Wait, you mean if I save money, the company just gives me more money? For free?" She smiled. "It is part of your compensation. Katie, it is yours." I sat back in my chair, stunned. For my entire life, money had been a weapon used against me or a carrot dangled just out of reach. Now, a corporation that had known me for 4 hours was treating me with more financial respect than my father had in 20 years. That was the moment I decided to weaponize my finances. If my family saw me as a liability, I would turn myself into a fortress of assets. I did not move into a trendy apartment downtown near the coffee shops and the nightlife. I rented a microscopic studio for 6 months, sleeping on a mattress on the floor while I aggressively saved for a down payment. Then, I bought a condo. It was in Red Mesa, a dusty town 40 minutes outside of the city center. It was not cool. It was not where the young professionals lived, but it was cheap, and the mortgage interest rates were low. The condo had beige carpets and outdated cabinets, but when I turned the key in the lock for the first time, the silence that greeted me belonged entirely to me. No one could kick me out of here. No one could tell me I was taking up space. I became obsessed, while my peers were going to brunch and buying leased luxury cars to impress people they did not like. I was listening to podcasts about the FIRE movement, financial independence, retire early. I devoured books on tax optimization and index fund allocation. I learned the language of money because I realized it was the only language that the world actually respected. Every Friday, when my paycheck hit my account, I had an automated system in place. It was cold, calculated, and beautiful. 20% went straight to my 401k to capture the match and lower my taxable income. Another 20% went to a high-yield savings account that I named the Freedom Fund. I lived on what was left. I drove a 10-year-old sedan. I packed my lunch every single day. I treated my personal economy like a business in crisis mode. I tracked every cent on a spreadsheet that I updated every night. watching my net worth go from negative student loan debt to zero, and then slowly creep into the positives, gave me a dopamine hit that no party or vacation ever could. A year later, I took a risk that would have made Vanessa faint. I found a rundown duplex in a working-class neighborhood near the airport. It was a foreclosure, smelling of stale smoke and neglect. I used my savings for the down payment and spent my nights and weekends renovating it. I learned how to lay vinyl plank flooring from YouTube. I learned how to patch drywall and install toilets. My hands were constantly covered in paint or dust. My fingernails cut short and practical. I remembered Vanessa always saying that Brielle had artist hands that could not be ruined by manual labor. Brielle is too sensitive for that kind of stress, she would say. Well, I was not. I was the mule. I was the workhorse. And now, the workhorse was building an empire. I rented out both sides of the duplex. The rent covered the mortgage on that building and half the mortgage on my condo in Red Mesa. I was 24 years old, and I was technically living almost for free. The phone calls from Ohio were the only things that could puncture my bubble. They were infrequent, usually prompted by Dad feeling a sudden pang of guilt, or more likely, Vanessa needing to boast about something. Brielle got a call back for a commercial, Dad shouted into the phone one Sunday. It is just a regional spot for a car dealership, but it is a start. She is working so hard. Katie, the acting classes are $300 a session, but you have to invest to harvest, right? That is great, Dad, I said, staring at my spreadsheet. I had just crossed a milestone of $50,000 in liquid assets. How are you? He asked, almost as an afterthought. Still doing the computer thing? Yeah, still doing the computer thing. I actually bought a rental property last month. A rental? His voice dropped, sounding concerned rather than proud. Oh, honey, are you sure that is wise? Being a landlord is so dirty. Broken pipes, angry tenants. Why do you take on so much burden? You are always making life harder for yourself. It is an investment, Dad. It pays for itself. Well, just be careful, he sighed. Vanessa says you should be enjoying your 20s, not worrying about mortgages. You are too young to be so serious. But I guess you have always been the tough one. You can handle the grit, Brielle. Well, you know, she needs things to be a bit smoother. I hung up feeling that familiar hollow ache. I was building a future with my bare hands, and to them, it was just me being gritty and miserable. They could not imagine a world where struggle led to security. To them, money was something you begged for or lucked into, not something you built. It was a colleague named Eli Porter who finally held up a mirror to my behavior. Eli was a senior analyst, a quiet guy with sharp eyes who sat 2 cubicles over. He noticed that I never went to happy hour, that I worked through lunch, and that I drove a car that sounded like a lawnmower. One afternoon, he rolled his chair over to my desk. You treat your budget like a war map, he said, nodding at the spreadsheet I had open on my second monitor. I minimized it quickly. It is just planning. No, it is defense, he said. He did not say it unkindly. I used to do that. I hoarded cash like I was expecting a famine. My therapist called it trauma response budgeting. I blinked. I do not have trauma. I just have bills. There is a workshop this weekend, Eli said, sliding a flyer onto my desk. It is not about stocks. It is about the psychology of money, boundaries, family dynamics. You should come. The coffee is terrible, but the perspective is good. I went. I told myself it was for networking, but deep down, I was curious. The workshop was held in a community center basement. The speaker was a woman named Dr. Aris, a financial psychologist. She spoke about money not as currency, but as emotional energy. She talked about families where one child is the identified patient, the one with all the problems who sucks up all the resources, and the other is the glass child. The glass child, she explained, is the one the parents look right through. They are capable, so they are ignored. They are strong, so they are burdened. They are praised for being low maintenance until they convince themselves that having needs is a character flaw. I sat in the back row, clutching my free coffee, and felt like she was reading my diary. The glass child often becomes a hyper-independent adult, she continued. They build walls of money and achievement to protect themselves because they know, deep down, that no one is coming to save them. I started seeing a therapist the next week. It was the first time I had spent money on something that did not have a tangible return on investment, and it terrified me. My therapist was a no-nonsense woman who did not let me hide behind my spreadsheets. In our third session, I spent 40 minutes talking about Brielle, how she was asking for money for a new headshot photographer, how Vanessa was guilting me about not coming home for Easter, how Dad was hinting that business was slow. She stopped me. "Katie," she said, "we have been talking for 3 hours total, and you have mentioned your sister's needs 50 times. You have mentioned your stepmother's opinions 30 times. You have mentioned your father's passivity 20 times. She leaned forward. "In that family, you are last. You know that. But here is the question that matters. In your own life, inside your own head, where do you rank?" I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I realized with a jolt of horror that I did not rank at all. I was working, saving, and sweating not just for me, but to prove I did not need them. I was still reacting to them. My entire identity was still defined by the negative space they had left behind. "I do not know," I whispered. "That is why you are tired," she said. "You are building a castle, but you are sleeping in the servants' quarters." I went home that night and drove to my duplex. I sat in the driveway and looked at the building. It was ugly, solid, and real. It was mine. I realized I had to change the narrative. I wasn't saving money to hide. I wasn't building wealth just to be the opposite of Brielle. I needed to build a life where I was the protagonist, not the supporting character who comes in to clean up the mess. I made a decision then. I would continue to build. I would buy more properties. I would max out every account, but not out of fear. I would do it to create a position of absolute, unassailable power. I knew, with a gut instinct that had never failed me, that the call was coming, the real call, the one where the temporary cash flow problems in Ohio turned into a disaster. I knew Vanessa's spending and Dad's blindness were on a collision course with reality. When that day came, I would not be the helpless daughter begging for approval. I would be the bank. And banks do not operate on feelings. Banks operate on contracts, collateral, and terms. I went back to my condo, opened my laptop, and started a new spreadsheet. I titled it The Fortress, and for the first time, I moved the line item labeled self-care from the bottom of the list to the very top. I was done being the glass child. It was time to become the diamond, hard, unbreakable, and valuable on my own terms. Success is a beacon. I learned that the hard way. You think you are climbing a mountain in the dark, invisible and safe, but the higher you get, the brighter your light shines, and eventually, the people who left you in the dark start looking up. 3 years into my time at Northbridge Analytics, I was promoted to team lead of the Security Operations Center. It was a serious step up. My salary bumped up significantly, crossing the 6-figure line, and my stock options vested. I made the mistake of updating my LinkedIn profile. Less than 24 hours later, my phone rang. It was Vanessa. We had not spoken in 3 months, not since a brief, awkward text exchange on her birthday, but now, her voice was warm, dripping with that sugary affection she usually reserved for wealthy neighbors or the parents of Brielle's dance students. "Katie, your father just saw your update online," she chirped. "Team lead. That sounds so important. We are just bursting with pride." I could hear the unspoken question hanging in the air. What does that pay? She did not wait long to ask it. After 5 minutes of small talk about the weather in Ohio, she pivoted. "So, a position like that, it must come with a significant package, right? Your father was reading about tech salaries. He says they give you stocks, like actual shares of the company?" "It is a standard package, Vanessa," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The stocks are restricted. I cannot touch them for years." "Oh, but they are there," she said, her tone taking on a hungry edge. That is what matters. Security, wealth building. You are so lucky. Katie, you have no one to worry about but yourself. A week later, the pitch came. Dad called me on a Sunday afternoon. He sounded excited, breathless, in a way I had not heard him in years. Vanessa and Brielle have a vision. Katie, he said, a real vision. You know how Brielle has always had an eye for design? And Vanessa knows everyone in town. They are going to open a shop. Heart and Home Studio. He described it. It was going to be a lifestyle boutique selling high-end furniture, artisanal candles, and curated home goods. Brielle would offer interior design consultations in the back. They had found a storefront on Main Street. Prime real estate with rent to match. We just need a little runway to get off the ground, Dad said. The banks are so tight with lending right now, and the interest rates are criminal. We thought, well, since you are doing so well, maybe you would want to be an angel investor? It is a family business. We would all be partners. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Dad, send me the business plan. The what? The business plan. The profit and loss projections, the market analysis, the inventory costs. If I am investing, I need to see the numbers. There was a pause. I could hear Vanessa whispering in the background. It is not about spreadsheets. Katie, Dad said, his voice losing some of its bounce. It is about faith. It is about seizing a moment. But sure, I will have them send you what they have. What they sent me was not a business plan. It was a mood board. It was a PDF filled with photos of beige linen sofas, dried pampas grass, and aesthetic coffee tables, interspersed with inspirational quotes about dwelling in beauty. There was no budget, no break-even analysis, no marketing strategy other than Instagram. I knew it was a disaster waiting to happen, but I also knew the game. If I said no, I was the unsupportive monster crushing Brielle's dream. I wrote a check for $5,000. I told myself it was a gift, not an investment. I mailed it with a 3-page letter detailing my concerns. I wrote about commercial lease liabilities, the low margins on retail goods, and the need for a 6-month cash reserve. Vanessa sent a text back. Got the check. Thanks for the tips, but you have to stop worrying so much. Business requires a little leap of faith. We are going to be huge. They didn't listen to a word I wrote. The first year of Heart and Home Studio was a masterclass in appearance versus reality. On social media, it looked like a triumph. Brielle posted daily videos of herself arranging organic soaps or fluffing pillows in the showroom. Vanessa hosted sip-and-shop events with champagne. They looked rich. They looked successful. But I knew better. I watched the background of the videos. I saw the store empty at 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I saw the inventory piling up. Expensive items that nobody in a working-class town like Willow Ridge could afford. 12 months later, the panic call came. It was a Tuesday night. Vanessa was on the line this time, and the sugary tone was gone. She sounded frantic, breathless. "We are in a bit of a bind," she said, skipping the hello. "The supplier is holding the Christmas shipment because of an unpaid invoice. It is a misunderstanding, obviously, but we need $20,000 to release the goods. If we do not get that stock, we miss the holiday season. Katie, we miss everything." "20,000?" I repeated. "Vanessa, that is a lot of money. What happened to the revenue from the summer sale?" "Expenses," she snapped. "Marketing, overhead, utilities. You have no idea how expensive it is to run a physical business. You sit behind a computer screen all day. You do not understand the real world." "I understand math," I said. "If you are $20,000 in the hole for inventory, you are insolvent." "We are not insolvent," she shrieked. "We are just illiquid. Look, your father and I were talking. We were thinking of taking a second mortgage on the house. The equity is just sitting there." My blood ran cold. The house, my mother's house, the place where I grew up, the one asset my father actually owned outright because my mother's life insurance had paid off the original mortgage years ago. "No," I said. "Do not touch the house. Dad promised that house would be safe. Well, unless you can help us, we do not have a choice, Vanessa said. We can't let the studio fail. Katie, it is Brielle's future. It is our reputation. I got Dad on the phone an hour later. I tried to reason with him. She is going to lose the house. Dad, I told him, the business is bleeding money. You cannot secure a loan against your home for a failing retail store. It is just temporary, Dad said. He sounded tired, beaten down. Vanessa has a head for business. Katie, she says once the Christmas rush hits, we will pay it all back. She knows what she's doing. You are always so pessimistic. I am not pessimistic. I am realistic. Please, do not sign those papers. I have to support my wife, he said, and that was the end of it. I did not give them the $20,000, but the requests didn't stop. They just fractured into smaller, sharper shrapnel. A month later, the roof on the studio is leaking. It is only $2,000. Can you cover it? We will pay you back next month. I paid it. They did not pay me back. 2 months later, the grandkids want to go to this performing arts camp. Brielle is short on cash because she reinvested everything into the store. It is $1,500. You wouldn't want them to miss out, would you? I paid it. No one mentioned repayment. It became a rhythm, a tire blowout, a vet bill, a surprise tax bill they hadn't anticipated. They treated my bank account like a leaky faucet they could tap whenever their bucket ran dry. When I finally tried to put a stop to it, the atmosphere shifted from desperate to hostile. I cannot send any more this month, I said during a call in October. I have my own property taxes due. There was a long silence on the line. Then Vanessa spoke, her voice ice cold. Fine, we will figure it out. We always do. God forbid you inconvenience yourself for your family. I have sent you almost $10,000 this year, Vanessa. And you make plenty, she snapped. Brielle has children. Katie, she has mouths to feed. You have, what, your index funds? You sit there in your empty condo with your piles of money and you judge us. It must be nice to be so cold. I stopped calling as often after that. The toxicity was leaking through the phone lines. I went home for Thanksgiving that year. Just for a day. It was a mistake. The dynamic in the house had curbed into something dark and suffocating. Vanessa was in total command. She answered questions directed at Dad. She checked his phone when it chimed. She decided what we ate and when we ate. Mark Burke, the man who used to run a construction crew, sat at the head of the table looking like a guest in his own home. He was thinner. He wore a shirt with a frayed collar, while Vanessa wore a new cashmere sweater she claimed was a sample from the store. Every conversation circled back to money, the cost of turkey, the price of gas, how unfair the banks were to small business owners. We are doing this for the family, Vanessa said, pouring wine, her eyes fixed on me. Everything we do is to build a legacy. It is a shame not everyone pulls their weight. I left early, citing a work emergency. By the time Christmas rolled around, the tension was a physical thing. I knew, from the vague updates and the silence on the group chat, that the Christmas rush at the store hadn't happened. I knew the second mortgage payments were likely coming due. I knew they were drowning, and they were looking for a life raft. But I was done being the raft. I was done setting myself on fire to keep them warm. When I drove up to the house on Christmas Eve, seeing the lights and the perfect wreath, I didn't feel the warmth of homecoming. I felt the wary adrenaline of a soldier entering a combat zone. I walked in, knowing I had changed. I wasn't the ATM daughter anymore. In their eyes, I had become something worse. By refusing to blindly fund their disaster, I had become the villain. I was the one holding out. I was the one who could save them but wouldn't. And that night, when Vanessa cornered me in the living room, desperation radiating off her like heat, I realized that the glass ornament wasn't just a casualty of a clumsy argument. It was a target. To her, that ornament represented the only thing in the house she couldn't control, just like she couldn't control me. The stage was set. The finances were ruined. The patience was gone. And when she shoved me into that cabinet, it wasn't an accident. It was an execution. I sat in the rental car at the end of the driveway, the engine idling, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned the color of bone. The house was glowing behind me. From the outside, it looked like a Christmas card. Warm, inviting, perfect. But inside, the air was toxic. I could still feel the phantom sting on my cheek where Vanessa had slapped me, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the cold, hollow ache in my chest. I looked at the upstairs window, the one that used to be my parents' bedroom. I felt like I was being exiled not just from a building, but from the memory of my mother. Leaving that house felt like leaving her behind, trapped in there with the woman who had erased her and the man who had let it happen. I put the car in drive and forced myself to look forward. The road ahead was dark and icy, but at least it was mine. By the time I landed back in Phoenix, the shock had worn off, replaced by a clarity that was sharp and terrifying. I went straight to Eli's desk the next morning. I didn't even put my bag down. "They threw me out," I said. Eli spun his chair around, his coffee cup pausing halfway to his mouth. "What?" "Vanessa hit me," I told him, my voice flat, factual. "She broke my mother's ornament, blamed me for it, slapped me, and then Dad kicked me out." Eli set the cup down slowly. His face darkened. "Katie, that is assault. You know that, right? That is not family drama. That is a crime." I told my therapist the same thing later that week. She sat in her armchair, listening intently as I recounted the details. The staged fall, the self-inflicted scratch on Vanessa's neck, the performance for the audience. "If they are willing to use physical violence and character assassination just because you said no to a request for money," she said, leaning forward, "where do they stop? What is the line, Katie? Because clearly, it is not physical safety." That question haunted me. Where do they stop? I realized then that the slap was not a loss of control. It was a transaction. It was a calculated enforcement of the rules. The rule was simple. I was the resource. I was the checkbook. And the moment the checkbook tried to speak, it had to be punished. The message was loud and clear. My value was tied exclusively to my utility and my silence. I went into lockdown mode. I muted the family group chat. I set a filter on my email so anything from Dad or Vanessa went into a folder I only checked once a week. I stopped sharing. No more updates about work. No more photos of my renovations. No more mentions of bonuses or promotions. I became a gray rock, boring, unyielding, and impossible to get a reaction from. At work, I threw myself into a new project auditing the security logs for a hospital network. My job was to find the truth in the data. People lied. Doctors lied about protocols. Administrators lied about access times. But the system logs never lied. Timestamp. User, a accessed file. B, timestamp. Door, C opened. The binary nature of it was soothing. In my world at Northbridge Analytics, there was only what happened and what did not happen. There was a record, a single version of the truth that could not be gaslighted away. I found myself staring at the security feed monitors in the server room, watching the little green lights blink. I started thinking about the concept of the objective witness. In Willow Ridge, I was the crazy daughter, I was the clumsy one, I was the liar. My word was worth nothing against the duet of Vanessa's tears and Dad's guilt. If I wanted to survive them, I did not need better arguments. I needed logs. 2 weeks after Christmas, Dad called. I let it go to voicemail twice before picking up on the third try. "Katie," he said. He sounded older. "I am glad you picked up." "I am busy, Dad. What is it?" I wanted to smooth things over," he said. "Vanessa is still very upset. Obviously, her neck is still bruising, but she is willing to move past it if you are. She knows the holidays are stressful. She has been under so much pressure with the store. Katie, you know how she gets when she is overwhelmed. She just snapped. It wasn't personal." I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. "She slapped me. Dad, she framed me." "Now, let's not use words like framed," he said. his voice taking on that pleading, conciliatory tone that made my stomach turn. It was a chaotic moment. We all saw different things. The point is, we are family. We cannot let one bad night ruin everything. Brielle misses you. Does she? I asked. Or does she miss the tuition payments? He sighed, a long, ragged sound. That is not fair. Look, I just want peace. Can we just agree to move forward? I am moving forward, I said. I am moving forward right here in Phoenix. I hung up. I wasn't angry anymore. I was terrified for him, and I was disgusted. He had rewritten the reality of that night in his head because the alternative, admitting he was married to a monster, was too painful to bear. He needed the lie. But I needed the truth. An idea sparked in my brain. It started as a petty fantasy. What if I had recorded that dinner? But it quickly hardened into a strategic necessity. If they were going to come for me again, and I knew they would as soon as the creditors started calling Hart and Home Studio, I needed an insurance policy. I needed to go back one last time. I sent a text to Dad the next day. I left a box of winter coats and some tax documents in the hall closet. I'm going to be in the area for a work conference next week. I will swing by and grab them. It will take 10 minutes. He replied instantly, Okay, we might be out at the store, but the key is under the mat. Perfect. I flew into Columbus on a Tuesday. I rented a car, drove the familiar route to Willow Ridge, and pulled into the driveway. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The house was quiet. The SUV was gone. I let myself in. The smell of the house, vanilla candles and old wood, hit me, triggering a wave of nausea. I didn't take off my shoes. I moved fast. I grabbed the box of coats from the closet to make my cover story legitimate. Then, I walked into the living room. The tree was gone, but the ghost of the argument still hung in the air. I looked at the glass cabinet. I looked at the spot on the rug where I had knelt over the broken ornament. I reached into my bag and pulled out the device I had bought from a spy supply website. It looked exactly like a standard, white USB wall charger. It was functional. You could plug a phone into it and it would charge. But behind the small black dot on the face was a high-definition lens with a motion sensor and a microphone. It connected to the Wi-Fi and uploaded footage directly to a cloud server. I knelt down by the outlet near the bookshelf. It was the perfect vantage point. It had a wide-angle view of the entire living room, the entrance to the kitchen, and the bottom of the stairs. It covered the main stage of the Burke Family Theater. I plugged it in. A tiny blue light blinked once, then vanished. I pulled out my phone and opened the app. A few seconds later, the live feed popped up on my screen. The image was crisp. I could see the dust motes dancing in the sunlight. I could see the empty sofa. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the other room. Got you, I whispered. I adjusted a stack of magazines on the shelf just slightly, ensuring they didn't block the view but made the outlet look natural. Used. I stood up and did a quick sweep. I checked the Wi-Fi connection strength. It was solid. I set the app to record on motion and sound, with the sensitivity set to high. I turned off all notifications on my phone so it wouldn't beep if the camera spotted something while I was in a meeting. I walked out of the house with the box of coats under my arm, locking the door behind me. I had been inside for less than 12 minutes. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the house with sadness this time. I looked at the app on my phone, resting on the passenger seat. The little green dot indicated the system was armed and ready. I didn't know when I would need it. Maybe never. Maybe Dad was right and they would leave me alone. Maybe the business would magically succeed and they would stop hunting for cash. But I knew better. The predator always returns to the easiest hunting ground. And the next time Vanessa decided to perform one of her tragedies, the next time she decided to throw herself against a wall or scream about how I was hurting her, there would be no debate about what happened. I had the master tape now. I was not just the victim anymore. I was the surveillance state. And for the first time in 15 years, I felt like I held a weapon that was stronger than their lies. The illusion of peace is a fragile thing. For 5 months, I had been living in a beautiful, quiet equilibrium. The winter had thawed into a blistering Arizona spring. and my life was blooming alongside the cacti. I had closed on another property, a small distress sale casita on the outskirts of Phoenix that needed a new roof and some serious plumbing work. It was not glamorous real estate, but the numbers worked. I spent my weekends there, ripping out drywall and negotiating with contractors, covered in dust and feeling more alive than I ever had in the pristine hallways of my childhood home. I was in the middle of a quarterly strategy meeting at Northbridge Analytics when the vibration started. My phone was face down on the mahogany conference table, but the buzzing was relentless. One buzz, two, three, then a continuous, angry hum that rattled the wood. I glanced down. The screen lit up with notification after notification. The family group chat, which I had muted, was exploding. Mom calling, Dad calling, Brielle sent a photo, Dad calling. Then, a text from my father popped up, bypassing the mute settings because I had left him as an emergency contact. Come home this weekend. Please, it is not a request. The family has a big problem. I need you. I felt the blood drain from my face. I need you. It was the phrase I had waited 30 years to hear. But now that it was here, it sounded less like an invitation and more like a subpoena. I did not reply immediately. The old Katie would have booked the first flight out, desperate to be the savior. The new Katie, the one who had spent thousands of dollars on therapy and hundreds of hours reading balance sheets, finished her meeting. I went home, cooked dinner, and slept on it. I decided to go, not because I was pulled by the strings of obligation, but because I needed to inspect the wreckage. You cannot close a case file until you have seen the scene of the accident. I flew into Ohio on a Friday evening. The air was heavy with humidity and the smell of impending rain. When I pulled up to the house in Willow Ridge, the grass was overgrown. It was a small detail. Dad used to be obsessive about the lawn, but it screamed of neglect. The mailbox was jammed so full that a few brightly colored envelopes were spilling onto the concrete. Pink envelopes, final notices. I walked inside. The house did not smell like vanilla candles anymore. It smelled of stale coffee and fear. I found them in the dining room. It looked like a war room where the losing side was negotiating a surrender. The large oak table was buried under a mountain of paper. There were bank statements, legal letters, tax documents, and credit card bills spread out in a chaotic mosaic of financial ruin. Dad sat at the head of the table, his head in his hands. Vanessa was pacing near the window, a glass of wine in her hand. Though it was barely noon, Brielle was slumped in a chair, picking at her cuticles, looking like a teenager who had crashed the car, not a 30-year-old woman with 2 children. "You came," Dad said, looking up. His eyes were rimmed with red. He looked 10 years older than when I had seen him at Christmas. "You said it was an emergency," I said, setting my bag down but remaining standing. "So, tell me, what is the emergency?" "It is a conspiracy," Vanessa spat, turning from the window. "The banks, the suppliers, they are all vultures. They see a small business owned by women and they just want to crush it." "Vanessa, stop," Dad said, his voice weary. He gestured to the empty chair opposite him. "Sit down, Katie. Please, we need to show you everything." I sat. I reached out and picked up the document on top of the pile. It was a letter from a law firm representing a commercial lender. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. I picked up another, a credit card statement for a business account. The balance was $42,000. The minimum payment had not been met in 4 months. I picked up a third. This one made my breath hitch. It was a letter regarding the house we were sitting in. "Dad," I said, my voice steady but cold, "why is there a lien on this house? Mom's insurance paid this off years ago." Dad flinched. He could not meet my eyes. "We had to leverage it," Vanessa interjected, moving to stand behind Dad, her hand on his shoulder in a gesture that looked more like ownership than comfort. "To get the studio open, we needed capital for the renovation. It was supposed to be a short-term bridge loan. We were going to pay it off as soon as the holiday sales came in." "But the holiday sales did not come in," I said, looking at the spreadsheet of the store's revenue. It was a bloodbath. They were losing $5,000 a month just keeping the lights on. The economy is terrible, Brielle whined from her corner. Nobody is buying high-end decor right now. It is not our fault. I ignored her and kept reading. It was worse than I thought. It was not just the business. It was personal debt, too. There were 3 maxed-out credit cards in Dad's name. There was a lease on a luxury SUV that cost $900 a month. There were unpaid property taxes. They were not just broke. They were drowning in a hole so deep they could not even see the sky. "We have spoken to a bankruptcy lawyer," Dad said softly. "But if we file, we lose the house. We lose the studio. We lose everything. My credit will be destroyed. I won't be able to retire." "I have sold all my jewelry," Vanessa said, her voice trembling with theatrical martyrdom. "My engagement ring, my mother's pearls. I have sacrificed everything to keep this family afloat. Katie, we have cut back on everything. We are eating pasta every night." I looked at her manicured nails. I looked at the bottle of wine on the sidebar. It was a $30 bottle. They had no concept of what sacrifice actually meant. "So," I said, pushing the papers away, "why am I here?" The room went silent. The air conditioner hummed, a rattling sound that grated on my nerves. Dad took a deep breath. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw the father I used to adore, but then I saw the desperation, the weakness that had allowed this woman to steer him off a cliff. "We ran the numbers," he said. "The lawyer said if we can come up with a lump sum to bring the mortgage current and pay off the critical supplier debts, we can restructure the rest. We just need to stop the bleeding." "How much?" I asked. $150,000, Dad said. I didn't blink. And we know you have done well," he continued, rushing the words now. "We know you have the properties. We know you have a good salary. You are single. Katie, you don't have kids. You don't have the expenses we have." "I have expenses," I said. "I have mortgages. I have a retirement to fund." "But you have excess," Vanessa said, leaning over the table. Her eyes were hard, predatory. "We are family. Family helps family. We carried everyone for years, and now we are in a tight spot. You are the only one who can save us. Literally, Katie. You are the only lifeline we have left." "Think of your nieces," Brielle sniffed. "If we lose the house, where do we go? Do you want them on the street?" I looked around the table. I saw 3 adults who had made 1,000 bad decisions and now wanted me to pay for them. They didn't want a loan. They wanted a bailout. They wanted me to reach into the foundation I had built brick by painful brick and tear it down to patch the hole in their roof. I thought about my first apartment, the mattress on the floor. I thought about the nights I ate beans and rice while Brielle was posting photos of her lobster dinners. I thought about the strong one label they had slapped on me so they wouldn't have to worry about my needs. "You want me to write a check for $150,000, I summarized, "to cover debts that were accrued buying things you could not afford, for a business that has never made a profit." "It is an investment in the family," Dad said. "We will pay you back, I promise, once the market turns around." "The market is not going to turn around for a store that sells $100 candles in a recession," I said. "Don't be cynical," Vanessa snapped. "Are you going to help us or not? Your father is on the verge of a heart attack. Look at him. Does his health mean nothing to you?" I looked at Mark Burke. I looked at the man who had watched his wife slap me and then told me to leave. I looked at the man who had let me pay for my own education while he bought his stepdaughter a convertible. I felt a strange calmness settle over me. It was the calm of the executioner. "I have a question," I said clearly, my voice cutting through the emotional fog they were trying to create. "What?" Dad asked, hopeful. "If I say no," I said, looking each of them in the eye, "if I walk out that door and fly back to Phoenix without giving you a single cent, what is the plan?" The silence that followed was absolute. Vanessa's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brielle stopped picking at her nails. Dad just stared at me, his face draining of color. They didn't have a plan. I was the plan. I was the emergency fund they had never saved. I was the insurance policy they had never bought. I was the retirement account they had neglected. They had lived their lives on the assumption that if things got truly bad, the strong one would catch them. They had bet their entire future on my inability to say no. "You don't have one," I said, answering my own question. "You assumed that because I am your daughter, I would set myself on fire to put you out. You assumed that my money is actually your money, just waiting to be claimed." "That is not true," Dad whispered, but his voice lacked conviction. "It is true," I said. "You leveraged this house, Mom's house, 3 times. You didn't ask me then. You didn't ask for my advice when you signed that lease for the store. You only ask for me when the bill comes due." "So you are saying no?" Vanessa's voice rose to a shriek. "You are going to let us lose everything? You are that selfish?" "I am considering it," I lied. I wasn't considering it. I knew exactly what I was going to do, but I needed to consult my own counsel first. "I need 24 hours. I need to look at my own liquidity. I am not keeping $150,000 under my mattress. Vanessa." "We don't have 24 hours, she yelled. "The bank deadline is Monday." "Then you better hope I can do math fast," I said, standing up. "I am going to my hotel. Do not call me. Do not text me. If you harass me, the answer becomes a permanent no." I walked out of the room. I felt their eyes boring into my back. I felt the weight of their expectation, the heavy, suffocating blanket of their entitlement. But as I walked out into the humid Ohio afternoon, I also felt something else. I felt the weight of the phone in my pocket, the phone that was linked to the cloud server, the phone that held the footage of the night the Ornament broke. They thought this was about money. They thought this was a negotiation about interest rates and repayment schedules. They didn't realize that the real accounting was about to begin, and the currency I was about to demand had nothing to do with dollars and cents. I got into my rental car and drove away, leaving them sitting in the silence of their own making, terrified of the one thing they had never bothered to understand: me. I told them I needed 24 hours. Mark and Vanessa exhaled, their shoulders dropping, likely imagining that I was heading back to my hotel room to frantically liquidate my index funds or call my retirement broker to cash out early. They thought I was scrambling to find a way to be their hero. They were wrong. I was not scrambling. I was strategizing. I went straight to the airport and caught the red-eye flight back to Phoenix. I needed to be on my own turf. I needed the dry desert air and the silence of my own condo, far away from the emotional humidity of Willow Ridge. I needed to think like a CEO, not a daughter. The next morning, I was not crying into a pillow. I was sitting at my dining table with Eli. We had 3 laptops open. On the main screen was a dashboard of my entire financial life. For the first time, I looked at it all in one place, my 401k, which had grown quietly over 5 years of maximum contributions, my Roth IRA, the equity in my condo, the equity in the duplex, the small brokerage account I used for stock picks, the emergency fund sitting in high-yield savings. It was a fortress. It was a tangible representation of every skipped party, every brown-bagged lunch, every extra shift I had worked while my friends were at Coachella. "It is impressive," Eli said, scrolling through the spreadsheet. "You have built a tank, Katie." "It is not enough," I said, my stomach churning. "If I give them the $150,000 they want, I wipe out my liquidity. I would have to sell the duplex or take a massive tax hit on the retirement accounts. I would be setting myself back 7 years. Eli spun his chair around to face me. "Then don't do it." "If I don't," I said, staring at the numbers, "they lose the house, my mom's house. They lose the business. Dad goes bankrupt. He is 60 years old. Eli, he cannot recover from that." "Okay," Eli said. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to that calm, analytical register he used when we were dissecting a security breach. "Let's look at the cost, the real cost. If you save them, you pay with 7 years of your freedom. You pay with your safety net. But what else? What does it cost your self-respect to hand a check to the people who slapped you and kicked you out?" I looked away. That was the price I couldn't put in a spreadsheet. And if you don't save them, Eli continued, they crash. You keep your money, but you carry the guilt. You become the villain in the family myth forever, the rich, cold daughter who let her father drown. There has to be a third way, I murmured. Banks lend money to risky businesses all the time, but they don't just hand over cash and hope for the best. They demand collateral. They demand operational control. They demand change. I pulled up a fresh document. I am not going to be their savior, I said, typing a header. I am going to be their lender of last resort, and my interest rates aren't financial, they are behavioral. For the next 4 hours, we built the structure of the deal. I treated the Burke family finances like a failing corporation that needed a hostile takeover to survive. First, I determined the absolute maximum amount I could lend without touching my retirement accounts or selling my properties. I could leverage a line of credit against my own equity and use my liquid cash. It was risky, but it wouldn't kill me. The number was $100,000, not the $150,000 they wanted. They would have to find the rest by bleeding for themselves. They have assets they are refusing to see. I told Eli, Dad has a hunting cabin at Lake Marlowe. He hasn't been there in 3 years. It sits empty. And Vanessa drives a luxury SUV that costs more than my annual mortgage payments. I typed into the term sheet. Condition 1. Immediate listing and sale of the Lake Marlowe property. Proceeds go to principal reduction. Condition 2. Sale of the leased luxury vehicle. Replacement with a used, economy sedan. They are going to hate that, Eli noted, taking a sip of his coffee. Good, I said. If they hate it, it means they are actually sacrificing something. If I am the only one feeling the pain, it is not a bailout. It is a robbery. I kept typing. Condition 3. Mandatory family therapy. Twice a month for 1 year. Provider chosen by the lender. Condition 4. Full transparency. I get read-only access to all bank accounts and credit cards. If I see a charge for a designer purse or a spa day, the loan is called immediately. Condition 5. No further debt. They cannot borrow a single dollar from anyone else without my written approval. Then came the structure. I didn't want this to be a personal loan from Katie to Dad. That felt too soft. Too easy to guilt trip away over a Thanksgiving turkey. I called a lawyer I knew, a shark named David who had handled some contract work for Northbridge. I need to form an LLC, I told him over the phone. Today, expedited filing. What is the name? David asked. Second Line Holdings, I said. Eli looked at me, raising an eyebrow. Second line? He asked. For my whole life, I have been the second option, I said, staring at the screen. I was the backup. The plan B? Well, now the second line is the one holding the checkbook. If they want the money, they deal with the entity, not the daughter. By late afternoon, the papers were drafted. It was a 20-page loan agreement. It was cold, precise, and legally binding. It outlined the interest rate, which was low, but present, and the repayment schedule. It included a clause that required them to sign a statement of facts, a document I had written that detailed exactly why the loan was necessary, due to mismanagement of funds, excessive personal spending, and the failure of Heart and Home Studio. I wanted them to sign their names to the truth. I wanted it on record that this wasn't bad luck, it was bad choices. I printed 2 copies of the contract. They were heavy in my hand. I was exhausted, but the adrenaline was keeping me upright. I was flying back to Ohio the next morning. I had bought myself a little more than 24 hours, but I knew they were desperate enough to wait. Before I packed the folder into my briefcase, I sat on my couch and pulled out my phone. I hadn't looked at the camera app since I planted the device in the living room wall charger a few days ago. I opened the app. The feed connected. The living room in Willow Ridge was dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the sheer curtains. It was quiet. I clicked on the Events tab. There were dozens of clips recorded over the last few days. Motion detected. Sound detected. I scrolled back to the timestamp of the intervention meeting I had walked out of yesterday. I watched the replay on the small screen. I saw myself walk out the door. I saw the silence that followed. And then I saw Vanessa turn to Mark. "I told you she was a cold-hearted bitch," Vanessa hissed on the recording. The audio was crystal clear. "She is sitting on a gold mine and she makes us beg? After everything we did for her?" "She has a point, Ness," Dad said, his head in his hands. "We did leverage the house without telling her." "So what?" Vanessa screamed, throwing a coaster onto the table. "It is our house. She is just lucky we didn't charge her rent for all those years she lived here. She owes us, Mark. She owes us for raising her. If she doesn't pay up, we tell everyone. We tell them she abandoned us. We tell them she is letting her nieces starve." "We can't do that," Dad mumbled. "Watch me," Vanessa said. "If she doesn't sign a check, I will ruin her reputation so fast she won't be able to get a job at a drive-thru." I froze. I replayed that 10-second clip. "I will ruin her reputation." I felt a cold chill wash over me, but it wasn't fear. It was the icy clarity of a sniper adjusting their scope. I had hesitated, just a fraction, about the harshness of my contract. I had worried that demanding they sell the cabin and the car was too vindictive. I had wondered if I was being too cruel. But watching Vanessa pace around that living room, planning to destroy me if I didn't comply, I realized I hadn't been cruel enough. They weren't family in trouble. They were hostages takers. And you do not negotiate with terrorists unless you have a sniper on the roof. I closed the app. I didn't delete the footage. I downloaded it to my phone and backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. I looked at the folder labeled Second Line Holdings. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play hardball? Let's play." I packed the contract. I packed the tablet with the downloaded videos. I packed my best suit, a charcoal gray power suit that made me look like a corporate executioner. I was going back to Willow Ridge, but I wasn't going back as Katie, the daughter who wanted to be loved. I was going back as the CEO of Second Line Holdings, and I was about to acquire a distressed asset called the Burke Family Truth. Walking into that living room felt like walking into a courtroom where I was both the prosecutor and the judge. I was not alone this time. Eli walked beside me, carrying a leather briefcase, dressed in a sharp navy suit that made him look like exactly what he was, a witness who would not let emotional manipulation slide. My father, Vanessa, and Brielle were waiting. The air in the room was stale, recycled through the vents of a house that was slowly dying of neglect. When I placed the thick binder on the coffee table, the sound it made, a heavy, dull thud, was the only noise in the room. Dad reached for it first. His hands were shaking slightly. He adjusted his glasses, squinting at the bold text on the cover page. "Loan agreement," he read aloud, his voice raspy. "Second Line Holdings, LLC." He looked up, confused. "What is this? What is Second Line Holdings?" "That is the entity lending you the money," I said, taking a seat in the armchair opposite them. I did not cross my legs. I sat squarely, feet planted, occupying the space with a confidence I had had to manufacture in front of a mirror that morning. "I am the managing member. Eli is here as the independent auditor of the agreement." Vanessa scoffed, a sharp, ugly sound. "An auditor? For a family loan? Katie, this is ridiculous. Just write the check so we can pay the bank on Monday." "Turn to page 3, I said, ignoring her. Dad flipped the page. I saw his eyes widen as he scanned the terms. "Principal amount, $100,000, he read. "Interest rate, 6%. Repayment term, 5 years. He looked up, his face reddening. "Interest? You are charging us interest?" "It is lower than the bank rate," I said calmly, "and significantly lower than the 24% you are currently paying on your credit cards. But the money is not the hard part. The conditions are—" I pointed to the document. "Read Section 4, subsection B." Dad read it in silence, his mouth tightening into a thin line. Vanessa, impatient, snatched the binder from his hands. "Immediate liquidation of non-essential assets," she read, her voice rising in pitch, "including the recreational cabin at Lake Marlowe and the 2023 Lexus SUV." She looked up at me, eyes bulging. "You want me to sell my car?" "You cannot afford that car." "Vanessa, I said. The lease payment is $900 a month. That is bleeding you dry. The condition of the loan is that you return the lease, pay the penalty, and purchase a used sedan for under $15,000. The cabin at the lake sits empty 40 weeks a year. It has equity. That equity goes to paying down the principal. This is insane, Vanessa shouted, slamming the binder shut. She stood up, knocking her knee against the table. This is not how you treat family. You are trying to humiliate us. You want me driving a clunker while you sit on your high horse? I want you solvent, I said. I am not funding a lifestyle you haven't earned. There are other conditions. Brielle, you are on the deed for the studio. You will sign a personal guarantee. If the business fails again, you are liable. Brielle gasped, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. But I have kids. I can't have debt like that. Then don't take the money, I said. And the final condition, mandatory family therapy, twice a month, for a year, with a therapist of my choosing, attendance is non-negotiable. Mark looked at me, his expression a mix of shock and wounded pride. You are treating us like we are strangers. Katie, you are treating us like bad clients. Because you have acted like bad clients, I shot back, my voice hard. You lied about the mortgage. You lied about the business revenue. You spent money you didn't have on things you didn't need. A bank would have foreclosed on you 6 months ago. I am the only lender on earth willing to give you a lifeline, but I am not doing it blindly. I won't do it, Vanessa hissed. I won't sell my car. I won't let you control my life. Then the deal is off, I said. I started to reach for the binder. Eli, let's go. No, wait, Dad shouted. He looked terrified. Katie, please, you know we can't. We have nowhere else to go. The bank is coming on Monday. Then sign the papers, I said. Or don't, but those are the terms. I am not here to be your daughter today. Dad, I am here to be the solution you asked for, and solutions cost something. Vanessa burst into tears. It was a loud, wailing sound that I had heard 1,000 times before. It is the market. It is just bad luck. Why are you punishing us for trying to build something? Why are you so cruel? Nobody forced you to open that studio, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through her noise. Nobody forced you to take a second mortgage on Mom's house. You made those choices. Now you have to pay for them. Dad stood up. He looked like he was about to be sick. He was shaking, a fine tremor running through his hands. I need a minute, he stammered. I need to think. This is too much. Mark, tell her to go to hell, Vanessa screamed. Quiet, Dad roared. It was the first time I had heard him raise his voice at her in 15 years. The room went dead silent. I am going to my office, he said, his voice trembling. I need to read this alone. Nobody follow me. He grabbed the binder and walked out of the room. His shoulders slumped as if he were carrying the weight of the entire house. I sat there, staring at Vanessa and Brielle. Vanessa was glaring at me with pure hatred, while Brielle was weeping softly into her hands. I felt nothing, no guilt, no satisfaction, just a cold, metallic resolve. In his study, Mark Burke shut the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. His chest felt tight. He felt humiliated. To have his own daughter, the one he had overlooked, the one he had dismissed, come into his house and dictate terms like a corporate raider was a shame he didn't know how to swallow. But beneath the shame was fear. He knew the numbers. He knew she was right. Without that check, the house would be gone in 60 days. He walked over to his desk and sat down, burying his face in his hands. He looked around the room, his sanctuary. The shelves were lined with books he hadn't read in years and photos of the family. He looked at a picture of him and Vanessa in Hawaii, smiling, carefree. He wondered where that money had actually come from. Had they put that trip on a card? Probably. He sighed and reached for his reading glasses on the desk. As he did, his elbow bumped a stack of papers, knocking them to the floor. Damn it, he muttered. He bent down to pick them up, As he was reaching under the edge of the bookshelf, his eyes caught something white plugged into the wall outlet. He paused. It was a white USB charger block. Mark frowned. He stared at it. It was plugged into the bottom outlet, half hidden by the dictionary stand. He didn't own a white charger. He was an Android user. All his cords were black. Vanessa and Brielle used iPhones, but their chargers were the new, small cubes, not this bulky, rectangular thing. And why was it plugged in down here, behind the books, where nobody ever sat? Curiosity, dull and nagging, made him reach out. He pulled the device from the wall. It felt heavy in his hand. He turned it over. There was no logo, no brand name, just a small, dark circle on the front face that looked like a lens. He froze. He was a contractor by trade, but he watched enough news to know what a hidden camera looked like. His heart started to hammer a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Who put this here? Was it the bank? A private investigator? He looked at his laptop sitting open on the desk. His hands were shaking so badly he had to use both of them to plug the device into the USB port. The computer chimed. A folder window popped up automatically. DCIM 100 Media. He clicked it. A list of video files appeared. Hundreds of them. He looked at the dates. They went back months. He scrolled to the bottom, to the very first files. Date, December 24th. Time, 8:15 p.m. He stopped breathing. December 24th, Christmas Eve, the night everything fell apart, the night Katie left. He moved the cursor. His finger hovered over the file. He felt a wave of nausea, a premonition that whatever he was about to see would destroy the last fragile pillars of his world. He double-clicked. The video player opened. The angle was low, wide, capturing the entire living room. The quality was startlingly clear. There was Katie, standing near the fireplace, looking tired. There was Vanessa, pacing, holding a glass of wine. Mark turned up the volume. "I am done," Katie's voice came through the speakers, tinny but distinct. "I am not giving you any more money, not a cent." He watched Vanessa lunge. He watched, his mouth falling open, as his wife, the woman he had defended, the woman he had mortgaged his life for, grabbed Katie by the arm. "You do not walk away from me when I am speaking." He saw the shove. It wasn't a stumble. It was a violent, two-handed push. He watched Katie fly backward. He watched her hit the cabinet. He heard the sound, the sickening smash of the glass ornament hitting the floor. He watched Katie drop to her knees, devastated. And then, he saw the thing that made his blood turn to ice. He watched Vanessa stand over Katie, her face twisted in a sneer, and then, with a terrifying, calculated speed, he watched Vanessa raise her hand, not to hit Katie again. He watched his wife claw her own fingernails down the side of her own neck. He saw the red welt appear. He saw her slap Katie across the face, a hard, vicious crack that made him flinch in his chair. And then, he watched the performance. He watched Vanessa throw herself onto the sofa, clutch her neck, take a deep breath, and scream. "Help! Mark! Mark! Help me!" Then he saw himself run into the frame. He saw the concern on his own face. He saw himself immediately go to Vanessa. He saw himself turn on Katie, pointing his finger, yelling at her. He watched Katie pleading with him. "Dad, she shoved me. She did this to herself. She is lying." And he watched himself say the words that now tasted like bile in his throat. "Stop lying. You have no respect." Mark hit the spacebar. The video froze on the image of Katie's face, tear-streaked, red, and utterly alone. He sat in the silence of his office, the only sound the rushing of blood in his ears. He had believed her, for 15 years. He had believed Vanessa was the victim and Katie was the problem. He had let his daughter walk out into the snow because he was too weak, too blind, too desperate to keep the peace to see the monster sleeping in his bed. The ornament, the broken glass, it wasn't an accident. It was a setup. He looked at the door. He could hear Vanessa's muffled voice from the dining room. probably complaining to Brielle about the injustice of it all. Tears welled up in his eyes, hot, stinging tears of shame. He had failed. He had failed as a father, as a husband to his first wife, and as a man. He had sold his daughter's birthright to finance a liar's lifestyle. He gripped the edge of the desk. He felt sick. He felt destroyed. But for the first time in a decade, he also felt something else. He felt a rage that was clean and absolute. He unplugged the camera. He picked up the laptop. He stood up, his legs unsteady but his purpose clear. He wasn't going to negotiate anymore. He was going to testify. When the door to the study opened, the sound was like a gunshot in the heavy silence of the dining room. Mark Burke walked out. He was not carrying the binder of loan documents anymore. He was carrying his laptop, holding it with a strange, stiff reverence, like it was a bomb that might detonate if he jostled it. His face was a color I had never seen on him before, a gray, ashen pallor that made his eyes look stark and terrifyingly awake. He did not look at Vanessa. He did not look at Brielle. He walked straight to the head of the table, shoved the pile of foreclosure notices aside, and set the laptop down. "Mark?" Vanessa asked, her voice wavering between annoyance and unease. "Did you read the contract? Are you going to tell her how ridiculous she is being?" Dad did not answer. He opened the laptop lid. He turned the screen so it faced the three of us. "Watch," he said. It was not a request. It was an order, delivered with a voice so stripped of emotion it sent a chill down my spine. He pressed the spacebar. The video player filled the screen. The date stamp in the corner read December 24th. For a moment, there was confusion. Brielle squinted at the screen. "What is this? Is this our living room?" Then the audio kicked in. The sound of Vanessa's voice, sharp and venomous, cut through the room. "I am not talking about you. I am talking about us." Vanessa froze. Her hand went to her throat, instinctively covering the spot where she had scratched herself that night. Her eyes darted from the screen to Mark, wide with panic. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "Mark, turn it off." "Watch," Dad repeated, louder this time. We watched. We watched the argument escalate. We watched the moment Vanessa lunged. We watched her shove me into the cabinet. We heard the sickening crash of my mother's ornament shattering against the floor, a sound that made Dad flinch even now, watching it for the second time. Brielle gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Mom?" But the video kept playing. It showed the aftermath. It showed Vanessa standing over me, sneering, and then, in high definition, it showed the moment of the lie. It showed her raising her hand, claws out, and raking them down her own neck. It showed her slapping me. It showed her taking a deep breath to prepare her fake tears before screaming for help. The silence in the dining room was absolute, shattered only by the tinny audio of Vanessa's staged sobbing coming from the laptop speakers. Vanessa's face went from pale to a mottled, furious red. She lunged across the table, reaching for the keyboard. "Turn it off! That is illegal! You cannot record me in my own home!" Mark caught her wrist. He didn't squeeze, but he didn't let go. He stopped her hand inches from the computer. "Sit down, Vanessa," he said. His voice was quiet, but it had a granite hardness to it that I recognized. It was the voice of the man who used to run construction sites, the man who had been buried under 15 years of passivity. "It is enough." "It is a fake," she shrieked, pulling her arm back. "She doctored it. Look at her. She is a computer genius. She made it up." Dad didn't even dignify that with a response. He leaned over and clicked on another file. This one was dated 2 weeks ago. It showed Vanessa and Brielle sitting on the sofa, drinking wine. "She is an ATM with legs," the digital Vanessa said, laughing. "Just keep guilt-tripping Mark about his health. He is so soft. He will make her pay. And Brielle, make sure you mention the kids. She has a weakness for the sob stories." "I know. Mom," the digital Brielle replied. "I just hope she doesn't cut us off before I get the new patio furniture." Mark hit pause. The image of his wife and stepdaughter laughing about his softness froze on the screen. He looked at Brielle. She shrank back in her chair, unable to meet his gaze. She looked small, caught, and pathetic. Then he looked at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with water, but for the first time in as long as I could remember, they were clear. There was no fog of denial, no haze of keeping the peace. He saw me. "I am sorry," he said. His voice broke on the second word. "Katie, I am so sorry. I have been wrong for years. I have been so wrong." "Mark, please," Vanessa started, her voice shifting instantly into victim mode, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't understand. We were just venting. Stress makes people say crazy things. You know I love you. You know I love this family." "Do you?" Dad asked, looking at her with a profound, exhausting sadness. "Because I just watched you beat my daughter and blame her for it. I just watched you mock me. That isn't love, Vanessa. That is management." He took a deep breath and straightened his spine. He looked at the pile of debt on the table, then at the loan agreement I had brought. "Here is what is going to happen," Mark said. "I am making 2 decisions tonight." He pointed to the binder. "First, I am signing that loan agreement, but not as a family. I am signing it. I am taking full responsibility for the debt. I will sell the cabin. I will sell the truck. I will work until I'm 80 if I have to. But I will pay you back every single cent, Katie." Vanessa opened her mouth to protest, but he cut her off. "Second," he said, looking at her ring finger, "I am filing for divorce." The air left the room. Vanessa looked like she had been slapped. "You can't," she whispered. "We have been together 15 years. You can't throw me out. I have rights. I will take half of everything." "You can try," Dad said, tapping the laptop. "But I have cause. I have evidence of abuse. I have evidence of financial coercion. I have evidence of fraud. If you want to fight this in court, be my guest. But I don't think a judge is going to look kindly on what is in these videos." "I will sue her," Vanessa screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She recorded me without my consent. That is a felony. I will have her arrested." "Go ahead," I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her hysteria. The camera was placed in my father's house, with his retroactive consent, to monitor the safety of his property, and honestly, Vanessa, please sue me. I would love to play these videos for a jury. I would love for the whole town of Willow Ridge to see exactly what happened to my mother's ornament. Do you really want that discovery process?" She stared at me, her chest heaving. She knew she had lost. She looked at Mark, expecting him to cave, expecting him to offer a compromise. "Pack a bag," Mark said. "You can stay at the hotel tonight. We will discuss the rest through lawyers." "Mark." "Go!" he roared, slamming his hand on the table. Vanessa flinched. She looked at Brielle, expecting solidarity, but Brielle was staring at the floor, crying silently, realizing that the ATM with legs had just closed the account and the soft man had finally found his spine. Vanessa turned and stormed out of the room. A moment later, we heard the front door slam. The silence that followed was heavy, but it wasn't oppressive. It felt like the air after a fever breaks. Dad looked at Brielle. "I am sorry. Brielle, I failed you too. I let you believe that life was free. I let your mother use you as an excuse to drain this family. I didn't do you any favors by teaching you to be helpless." Brielle wiped her nose. "What is going to happen to the studio?" "It is closing," Dad said gently. "We cannot afford it. You are going to have to find a job. Honey, a real one." Then he turned to me. He walked around the table and stood in front of me. He looked old, tired, and broken. But he was my dad again. "I put you last," he said, tears finally spilling over his cheeks. "Your mother. She would have never forgiven me for how I treated you. I thought you were strong, so I let you carry the weight. I didn't realize I was the one piling it on your back." "I am strong," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But I shouldn't have had to be." "No," he said. "You shouldn't have. I will sign the papers. Katie, I will follow every condition, but I have one request. What? Don't let me own this house alone again, he said, looking around the dining room. I don't trust myself not to be weak again. I don't want to lose the only thing of your mom's I have left. I nodded. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pen. I opened the binder to the addendum page. We will add a clause, I said. The title of the house at Willow Ridge will be transferred. It will be co-owned by you and a new irrevocable trust, the Maria Burke Memorial Trust. You can live here for the rest of your life, rent-free, but you cannot mortgage it, you cannot sell it, and you cannot add anyone else to the deed without the trust's approval. And who controls the trust? He asked. I do, I said. He smiled, a sad, relieved smile. Good, that is exactly how it should be. He took the pen. His hand shook as he signed his name, but he didn't hesitate. He signed away his autonomy to save his soul. 5 years later. The sun in Phoenix is setting, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and purple. I am standing in the center of my living room in the new house I designed myself. It is open, airy, and filled with light. On the wall, there is a gallery of photos. There are photos of me hiking in Sedona, photos of me and Eli on our wedding day, photos of Dad, looking older but peaceful, holding a fishing rod at Lake Marlowe. He sold the cabin, but he still rents a small boat there sometimes. And in the center of the wall, in a frame that catches the evening light, is a picture of my mother. Next to it, hanging from a small brass hook, is a replica ornament, a glass sphere with a snowflake inside. It is not the original, that one is gone, but this one represents something else. It represents the truth. I check my watch. I have to leave in 20 minutes. I am leading a workshop tonight at the community center. It is the first session of a nonprofit I started called the Last Child Project. We work with young adults who were the fixers in their families, the ones who were parentified, ignored, or treated as financial resources. We teach them about financial literacy. Sure, we teach them about compound interest and Roth IRAs, but mostly, we teach them about boundaries. We teach them that no is a complete sentence. We teach them that being strong doesn't mean you have to carry the world. I grab my keys and walk out the door. In the voiceover of my mind, I think about the lesson my father tried to teach me all those years ago. He used to say that a family is a unit where you put the person with the greatest need first. He thought that was nobility. He thought that was love. But he was wrong. If you always put the neediest person first, you end up ruled by the weakest link. You end up feeding the hunger until it eats you alive. For 15 years, I stood at the back of the line, waiting for my turn to be seen. I waited for permission to exist. I waited for an apology that I thought would fix everything. But the fix didn't come from an apology. It came from a camera lens and a contract. It came from realizing that I didn't need them to give me my place in the line. I could simply step out of line and build my own road. My dad finally saw me that night, but by then, I had already seen myself, and that was the only vision that mattered. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please let me know in the comments down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Katie's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story.